there's not too much activity right now in the market, almost the market in a lull, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, market's been fairly slow. Last week was a bit of an up on the previous week. Volumes were up 117 or so percent to 3.2 billion kwacha. But we've had a slow start on yesterday's and Monday's trading. And, we sort of foresee, a similar slow week going forward.
All right, I want to touch on the central bank leaving the benchmark rate steady at 9%. Is this, do you think, moving or filtering into the rest of the market?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's we're still trying to grapple with how that's going to be implemented in terms of lending from the banks, because ultimately that's what they were trying to do. And, with the recapitalization, we're hoping that that's going to filter down. But also it shows that they're trying to spur on lending, and it's probably likely that it will remain in that region. We don't see it going up unless there's a big uptick in the economy or excess demand. And at present, that doesn't look like a likely scenario.
And speaking of banks, we're expecting June numbers, and the Bank of Zambia has set a deadline for capital requirements. How is this likely to play out?
Yeah, as you probably know, around about January, they announced new capital requirements, $20 million for local banks and $100 million for foreign banks. And part of that was, there were different stages of deadlines. So 30% by June, another 30%, so 60% by September, and 100% by December. The June numbers are going to be critical in seeing where the different banks stand as regards that requirement. And that will probably set the pace for, who's going to remain, who's going to survive, and who's likely going to make it to the end of the year. And as far as we know, probably only one bank fully meets the requirements, and that's Zanaco. But we're going to see how it plays out in the June numbers, and we expect those around about July or so.
There's a lot of uncertainty about the rebasing of the currency, isn't there? Because the finance minister has even said that dollarizing the economy, if you quote prices in dollars, it will be criminal, and you may be liable for up to 10 years imprisonment.
Yes, more and more coming out. I think part of that was to mitigate the dollarization that happens, but then it increases, your forex risk for a lot of companies, especially those that have to make purchases and resell in dollars, or that provide services and try to match their income with their expenditure. Ultimately, it's just going to mean that businesses, especially the more sophisticated, are going to get into hedging strategies, and probably you see a lot more activity in the forward markets and that kind of thing. But for the less sophisticated businessman, since you can't quote in dollars or demand dollars as payment, what will be a likely scenario will be to try and look for, work with a fixed rate that you project, and that likely won't that likely won't result in a loss of margins, and that might have some inflationary pressure. But previously we've seen exchange losses and that kind of thing, especially with big corporates that haven't managed foreign exchange risk really well. And it's going to be more pertinent that they do that with this kind of scenario. So it's long term, hopefully it will smoothen out things. But ultimately, it's going to have to lead to a more sophisticated approach to foreign exchange management.
Because one of the voices in this debate is the pensions and insurance industry that have said the rebasing of the local currency might have an effect on pension funds and investment figures, and the public might have a perception that their investments are being eroded.
Yes, I mean, there's always that with rebasing. I mean, it's on the one hand, there's always the perception that 50,000 kwacha was a lot more than 50 kwacha without the 3 zeros. But ultimately, I think though it's dragged a bit, it should have happened by now based on the prior announcement. But the plan is to sort of have both currencies moving at the same time and have dual quoting, which is going to be expensive, yes. But primarily, that's the whole point of doing that is to make sure that people understand that 50,000 is equivalent to a 50 kwacha, or 20,000 is equivalent to a 20 kwacha, and that that doesn't necessarily change the value of what they have, but it's more of a recalibration of both your expenditure and your income and all of that. So yes, there is a perceptional risk, especially with pensions. I mean, the biggest cost would primarily probably with adjusting the way the systems work and to recalibrate. But it's hoped that that's going to flow in.
We'll leave it there. Many thanks. Jimmy Mwambazi with us in Lusaka, financial analyst at Stockbrokers Zambia.